evening, Frank. Let's beginning with your birth. Can you tell me where and when you were born?
I was born on the 20th of February 1909 at number 3 Bells Eyes Park, Hampstead.
Very precise. And the names of your parents?
My father's name was Nan Rees. My mother's name was Maud Elsa Rees. She was the daughter of Joseph Eisenman, who lived opposite with my grandmother at number 39 Bells Eyes Park.
So you're right. So where, going back a minute, where did your parents met? Where?
Well, my father came over from Germany, where he was employed by my grandfather's half-brother in Fürth, Bavaria, and came over to his half-brother and married the boss's eldest daughter.
What sort of date was the marriage?
1908, April 2nd.
Parents married. And fine. And so your father had come to this country not long before?
In about 1898 or sometime like, or even might have been before. I don't know exactly. Could be 1896.
Thereabouts.
Right. That's my grandfather.
Right. We'll look at I can see about photo that's
It's a miniature. It's a painted on ivory.
Your grandfather, and next to it,
my grandmother.
Right. Both paternal.
No, that was my mother's father and mother.
Mother's. So right.
My father's mother. My grandfather on my father's side was a hop merchant and lived in Nuremberg, as did my grandmother until she died.
So it was your mother's family, you were saying, came from Fürth, was it?
No, my father came from Fürth. My mother's family, through my grandmother, traces the forebears back to many generations.
In Nuremberg, you say?
No, in London. My mother's family. My grandmother, my family, my father's family came from Fürth. So if you want to
yes. So that's on your mother's side, that's a sort of documented descent, is it, a genealogy in England, or you just know this as a...
I know it.
In fact, how far back you actually go is just to your, how far? Grandparents?
I can't go back on my mother's side to my grandfather. I don't know anything about his forebears. My grandmother, I know, was a Lazarus, part of the Lazarus and Rosenfeld clan that goes back many generations. As far as
in England.
And as far as my father's side is concerned, all I know is that his forebears came from Ulm in Germany.
Do you know anything else of any particular Jewish interest about their affiliations or synagogal connections on either side?
Well, my grandfather, that's the one up there, was a member of the original congregation which assembled in the Warncliffe rooms of the Great Central Hotel on the foundation of the liberal Jewish movement.
That was what year?
That I don't know.
The liberal Jewish movement in England. That was that not soon after 1900?
Yes, something like that.
Yeah.
But the exact date I don't know.
So that grandfather was a founding liberal.
Founding liberal.
Yes.
And my parents, my mother and father, were married under the aegis of the liberal Jewish synagogue at the Trocadero in 1908.
Do you know who married them?
No, I don't. I don't.
It didn't mention three other people, four other people at that meeting.
Well, we know that Lily Montague was there, Claude Montefiore was there,
Arnold Jacobs.
what?
Arnold Jacobs.
Lionel Jacobs was there.
And your grandfather, I think they were.
Well, there were a number of people there, I believe.
Those we know of. Right. So your
That was before Israel Matter came over from America
Yes.
to join the movement and become its first minister.
Yes. Any idea what interested your grandfather in liberalism particularly?
He was the doyen of the toy trade, the biggest importer of German toys. Toys came in those days mainly from Germany and was very well breeched and was a leader in his particular field. Why he was Jewish, why he particularly felt that he should be a liberal, I don't know.
Right, let's just recapitulating your four branches.
My father's father was a hop merchant who originally came from Ulm and then moved to Nuremberg. My father's mother lived in Nuremberg. My mother's father was Joe Eisenman, who was the doyen of the toy trade and was amongst the original congregation in the Warncliffe Rooms of the Great Central Hotel. My mother's mother, whose name was Esther Lazarus, comes from a long line of Lazarus and Rosenfelds that have been in this country for a considerable number of years.
Right, it's useful to clarify. Have you got any particular recollections of your grandparents?
Well, I do know that I was grandfather's favourite.
But as to what type of people, and were they Germanic or Yiddish type of background that you remember?
Germanic, but not Yiddish. Definitely not Yiddish.
They were sort of cultivated. They weren't the East. They weren't the stereotype of the East European Jew.
No,
they were more
was
cultivated.
Well-known member of the community, very well off, and they followed the Jewish holidays to an extent, but not to an enormous extent.
So, and your own parents, what could you like to say about them? They were both born in this country.
No, my father was born in Nuremberg, went to work for Joe Eisenman's half-brother in Fürth, and then came to this country because this country was the biggest importer of German toys at that time. And he went in from the German side of the toy trade, he came over to the English side of the toy trade and married the boss's daughter.
Yes, big part, yes. So, do you have, and your father continued in that same trade, did he?
Yes.
He built up, did he have a successful business?
My father became a partner in the business shortly after marrying my mother, and he, in 1919, when my grandfather died after an operation, he parted company with the original firm of Eisenman and Company because he and his cousin by marriage, I can only call it that, Paul Eisenman, Paul Ellison as he was, because they all changed their names in the
During the First World War.
First World. Eisenman changed to Ellison, Rees, R-E-I-S, changed to Rees.
So Reis was the earliest form, was the form
Yes,
of German.
R-E-I-S. And in 1919, Paul Ellison, who was the son of Joe Eisenman's, or Joe
That's a
Ellison's,
bit involved, he doesn't want to know about that.
Yes.
That's a bit involved.
he came over to England, and there were three of them. There was Paul Ellison, who was the son of the half-brother, my grandfather, and my father. When my grandfather died, there was just Paul Ellison, so my father took over as his portion of the business three of the factories, the toy factories that had been established in this country, and he started on his own, becoming one of the biggest importer of certain items in the toy trade.
The First World War, did that have any significant effect on the family?
Well, he fought over this side in the First World War.
My father fought, was called up, and in one of the regiments of the Middlesex Regiment for a short period until he was invalided out for some reason, flat feet or what have you. And he then became personal private secretary to the Member of Parliament for Stepney.
Is that a Jewish MP?
No, he wasn't. He wasn't a Jew, was he?
He wasn't a Jew.
George Lansbury, wasn't he?
No, that was J.D. Kiley,
Oh,
K-I-L-E-Y, who was the head of the largest wholesaler of toys in this country. He was the Member of Parliament for Stepney, and my father became his general factotum.
That was just...
That was during the war. I
Yeah.
can't give you a date.
No, so did he find that interesting, or you don't? Did he reminisce about it?
Did he?
Did he tell you about his experience? Was it
Well,
interesting?
My father wasn't all that communicative.
Yeah.
When you realise that by 1918, when the war finished, I was only 9 years old, he'd hardly have discussed those sort of things with me.
He wouldn't have discussed anything with you for a
Right.
while.
And we couldn't have either.
But the war, as regards the business of toys, that wasn't affected by the war because the family had their own factories in this country, was it?
There was one aspect of the war was that the news, Daily News I think it was, put some money up so that a factory could be started to make dolls in Chesham, to where my grandfather's family and our family had moved to get out of London.
In Chesham.
In Chesham, Buckinghamshire,
Yes.
where there were 3 toy factories and 1 brush factory.
Are there any such factories remaining there now?
Well, the Rees part of the firm was sold out in 1964. So, and by then, most of the factories had been moved elsewhere. And as far as the brush factory is concerned, it was sold right about 1956, something like that. And the family, the 2 daughters of Joe Eisenman got the proceeds.
So
His mother
that's
was
got-
on.
So, right, your father's business that was. How about now your religious life in your family? You were liberals.
Liberal.
How about your siblings? Do you have brothers or
I have
sisters?
2 brothers.
What, older or younger?
Well, one was 2 years younger than me. He died in 1962. The other one is 10 years younger than me, and he's nothing. He's neither one thing nor the other.
It's not. Do you mean not Jewishly involved?
No.
No.
He's been married 4 times.
And none of them have been to
Oh dear. So anyway, you had the 2 younger brothers. What was your religious upbringing?
Jewish to an extent, though I don't think we ever kept a kosher household.
Parents were members of the
Liberal Jewish synagogue.
St.
I
John's
remember vividly towards the end of the war,
Which war were you from?
World War One, being a page at my aunt's wedding at the Hill Street Synagogue, which I remember very well because when I went to boarding school, I was doing the correspondence classes, and in the holidays I used to go down to do the Sunday school at Hill Street, and I was at the age of 16 amongst the last lot of people to be confirmed. In those days we didn't have the mitzvah. We had confirmation at the age of 16.
You said the last lot to be confirmed, what, at Hill Street?
At Hill Street.
And so you remember the building of the St. John's Wood?
Yes, the photographs of the first child to lay a brick, which was the idea to gather money, was my youngest brother, and his photograph appeared in the Daily Mirror on the day following. So I remember that very vividly. I happened to be, at the time, the correspondent for the school's magazine, the Sunday school's magazine, for that occasion. I remember it very well. I forget what it was
Which
called.
year was this? The foundation was, when was the LJS built?
The LJS was midnight, I was.
But you remember?
I remember
what
it,
age?
but I don't remember the date.
If you were confirmed and you were the last person,
1625.
We'll work that out after. Right. So were you impressed by the new building then?
Well, when I saw it, then it was only just the foundation stone was being laid. It was a fantastic building. For many years afterwards, I was one of the stewards, and remember very well, for instance, people used to come, particularly on Yom Kippur, from all other synagogues, wanting to come in to see what was happening, because the reputation of Dr. Mattock was such that people wanted to see and hear. And I used to have to invite them. I said, well, you can't come in now, we're full and we've got an overflow going, but if you want to see Dr. Mattock, come on Sunday, because we had then Sunday services.
Were there any other notable preachers you remember? Lily Montague, for example?
My wife and I, we were married in the Liberal Jewish Synagogue in 1937, on the 27th of July, by Dr. Mattock, Rabbi Persweig, and Leslie Edgar. And we remember a whole succession of the Starrells who went to Seattle. There was, I can't remember.
No, not to worry.
Can we switch it off a moment?
Yes, you want to. Yes, where did you go to school?
I went to school at, all right?
Yeah.
I went to school to St. Edmunds at a boarding school at the age of 9
Whereabouts is this?
in
London.
Hindhead, Surrey.
Okay.
And from there,
Were there other Jewish boys there, or were you almost one of
I
the few?
practically on my own, I think. I don't remember any Jewish boys there.
Do you remember? Were you known to be Jewish? Did you have any anti-Semitism? Or?
Certain amount. In those days, couldn't help it. There was the end of the dirty German Jew was pushed around like nobody's business. anyway, it wasn't too bad, but of course, when everybody else went to chapel on a Sunday, I was busy helping to form a pitch and putt golf course in the grounds, and I was different to everybody else. I didn't go to chapel.
You remember being the only one?
I was the only one.
Right.
Or possibly there was one other, but I can't remember.
Almost.
From there I went to Morven College at the age of 13
Of course, in Melbourne.
in Morven. And then at the age...
How about, may I ask again, few other
There
Jews
were
there?
a few Jews. Well, it was a big school, 600 people, 600 boys.
Not
And
in-
again, there was a certain amount of anti-Semitism. But I didn't shine there. I never got beyond the middle school. And then my parents took me away from there when I was 18 years old and sent me to a French-speaking school in Lausanne-Ougy in Switzerland, a commercial school. And from there I went, after a year, I went to the big Bing toy factory in Nuremberg, where I learnt my trade as a toy maker. And then
Do you mean that you learned all the details of handiwork as well as the styles?
no, I handled all the merchandise in the sampling department. I learned how to sell the merchandise, what to pick out about it, how to present it. Nothing to do with the manufacture of it, but as my father had the sole importation of the largest factory in Germany, making metal toys and other merchandise, as he was the sole importer for England and the British Commonwealth except Canada, then it was natural that I should be embroiled in the family business. And then I spent...
Can I just ask, in Germany, did you make contact with the Jewish community where you were?
To a certain extent, I got to know a number of boys of my own age and used to go on hikes on a Sunday with a particular friend of mine who lived round the corner. We used to go out in cattle trucks, 4th class, for an hour or 2 hours in the train, and then hike something like 10, 15, 20 miles to catch another train and come back. You were leaving at 4 o'clock in the morning and coming back at midnight. And then, of course, on one occasion, we were crossing a field when 3 young Nazis were riding up and down on their bicycles, and I said to my friend Willie, if I have to step off this pathway again, I'll knock them. And he turned round to me and he says, that's all they're waiting for, Frank. They've got a knife, and we should be, both of us, in a lot of trouble.
What sort of year was this, you said? You were how old?
That was 1927.
So this was just the beginning of
it, and I remember very, very well Streicher selling Der Stürmer in front of the tram stop in Nuremberg.
Did you get Did you get any feel of what future events might be?
Well, it was beginning to rear its head, but it was like a lot of, there was the Stahlhelm, there was all sorts of different associations. I mean, just the same way I was a member of the Maccabi over there, and Jugendfreund, the young friends of nature friends, where we travelled, where we went on hikes.
So, and did you go to synagogue there at all?
Yes, but only on high holy days.
You lived with another
I lived with my father's youngest brother's wife.
And your uncle.
No, he wasn't. He was in this country, though.
Oh.
I didn't realise.
Fred was in this
Oh,
country.
he wasn't married then?
He was married.
So you
He
lived-
was married.
Your aunt looked after you.
My aunt and her son, the three of us, lived in a flat in the Pilatestrasse in Nuremberg.
They were quite prosperous, were they? Nice flat?
Oh yes, they were
Yes.
well.
With servants?
No, we didn't. Wait a minute. Yes, I believe they had one
What
servant.
an age, but just
My own family, of course.
yeah.
They had a
Did
21
did-
room house.
your own family going back? Yes, in London, where you when you
Yeah.
grew up. Yes,
As
was
we
it so?
grew up, we
Go
had
up.
a chauffeur and his wife who helped, a parlour maid, a housemaid, a between maid, a kitchen maid,
Gardener and a
a
lady's maid.
cook, housekeeper, a lady's maid, and a gardener.
And-
And otherwise,
and,
didn't have
and
anybody.
a companion.
And my mother had a companion on top.
Most of those living on the
All of
premises
them living in.
And you say in the big house in Eton and
Well, we started off in Belsize Park, and then we moved to Eaton Avenue.
and they so and this type of establishment was kept until you'd all
Well,
grown up,
it
or-
was kept until the war broke out in
39.
1939. I had become, by then, by 1939, I had been doing in my spare time a lot of social work down the East End of London.
Yes.
The Burnham Barham settlement, at the Tottenham settlement, at the Cambridge and Bethnal Green Boys Club.
Oh,
And I'd also, in 1933, become a special constable. So when war broke out in 1939, I joined up full-time special and did for 3 months pounded a beat until I got a commission in the Royal Air Force, which I joined on the 1st of May 1940.
and through the war, and you stayed on the rest of the war.
I stayed on the rest of the war, was mentioned in dispatches, and
Went round
Well,
one.
I went, as a matter of fact, it was interesting. I was posted at one stage as a ship's adjutant. I went from Avonmouth in a convoy down to Freetown, from Freetown to Cape Town, where we were put into civvies, the 12 of us who were running the ship, from a military point of view. We went across to the Buenos Aires, the Argentine. From there we went to Santos and Sao Paulo, and then to Rio. Came back to Freetown where we put on our uniforms again. Went round to Bathurst, and Bathurst we went to Liverpool, where we got off the boat. And I was asked to do it again, and I said it wasn't fair on a married man to do it. I wanted a job elsewhere. And I went to Wing, RAF Wing, as flight lieutenant by then. And then I got promotion to a squadron leader and went across to the satellite in command in what date was that? What? 42 or 40, 43. And I carried on till I was demobbed as number 21. That was my demob number. When that was, I don't quite know.
45.
Yes, late,
45.
yes, about autumn 45.
Right. Interesting. I think we skipped in a way a little. That was your came from your parents' house got, I suppose, broken up into. What
Well,
you said when the war
they
came.
moved down to
they
Northwood.
moved to Northwood
Right.
during
Because he
the
had a
war.
big house out
And
there.
big town.
Not,
We had
Corner of
another-
Maxwell
which we
Road.
leased a big house in Maxwell Road,
Corner of Maxwell Road. down
corner
on
of
the Red
Maxwell
Road.
Road. And then at the end of the war, the owner wanted it back, and my father and mother moved to a house in Green Lane, Northwood.
did they? I suppose.
She died at Maxwell.
She died in Maxwell House, yes. Not my
Maxwell,
father.
yeah.
My father moved to.
Then he moved to a house
Do
in...
you have I'm interested in the social changes, the change from having a dozen servants to none. Did your parents?
Well, they didn't
Well,
have none.
they didn't
They
have none,
never
don't
had
you
none.
worry. My father still had the chauffeur, the chauffeur's wife, a maid and a cook housekeeper.
Throughout through the war. Really?
No, that was after the war until
He had
he
it
died.
through the war.
And he had it through the war.
They never...
Really didn't think that happened. Oh, interesting. Let's go back to your career. So you were in the before that you told me you went to Germany to learn about the toy trade. You continued. Were in that. You continued in the toy trade then up to the war, did you?
Yes.
In the family. What
In
was
the family business,
Yeah.
gradually taking over more senior positions until I became director of the firm. But by the end of the war, we were practically no longer in the business of importation. We had our own factories. We had a factory making soft toys, children's soft toys. We had a factory making rosebud dolls. We had another factory. Well, we had 12 factories in all, one of which was a vacuum flask factory.
You went into other fields than toys.
Well, no, it so happened that I told you that I went to learn the business in Germany. Now, the German firm made metal toys. They also made bashed out metal parts to sell to an enamel works. The metal part was enamel, which, as you know, is enamel works. So we became sole importers for that. From enamel works, they bought into China. From China, they bought into glass. From glass, they bought into vacuum flasks, which are glass. And we became sole importers for everything which they had. Now, after the war, only by that time, glass was being made by the GEC in this country, and Thermos and ourselves, Isovac, and 3 other manufacturers were drawing off glass works. And then you either made or bought in the metal containers to go in. So, and from that, of course, you make, once having made vacuum flasks, you make picnic cases, and when you have a wood factory, which we did, we made occasional tables, wooden work, all sorts of wooden work. It spreads automatically.
Quite extensive.
And we supplied Marks and Spencer's for years with all sorts of goods. The principal suppliers of teddy bears. At one time we supplied, and having made ourselves tennis rackets for 5 shillings.
Yes. But during the war, your factories were turned to war, were
Yes.
they? Or?
Somebody with a sense of humor. We were making, in our soft toy factory, we were making principally three things. Teddy bears are filled with kapok, and kapok is the background of safety belts at sea safety belts. So we were making sea safety belts. We were also making sergeant stripes, reams and reams of them. They were corporal stripes, lance corporal stripes, sergeant stripes. And just for, I don't know, a quirk of what's his name, we were making ladies' sanitary belts. What that had to do with sergeant stripes, I don't know. What? We were making them for the Ministry of Defence.
Right. So you were factories were commandeered. Yes. So now, how about your marriage? We've skipped the important matter of your getting married, meeting Nan. How did that come about? Or?
Well,
I think we met at the alumni.
We met at the alumni.
You were both
I'd been a member. I'd naturally progressed from the time I was confirmed into the alumni, and attractive girl turns up, and we got to know each other very well. I think I took her out to a nightclub before anybody else did, but in the meantime she was engaged 3 times before I got round to getting engaged, and we got married in 1937.
Right. And where did you live? You got yourself somewhere to live?
We had a flat in Abbey Road, opposite the Abbey Road Synagogue that Lionel Jacobs was. What?
Yeah, the New London congregation. Yeah.
The new.
Yeah. Yeah.
We dead opposite. We had a flat there until the war broke out, and then I got by that time we had a baby.
The first child was born then.
39.
Yes.
That was Toinette. She was born in 39.
Toinette, you call her?
Toinette,
Short,
Toinette, Toinette Leonie Elka Rees. And she was, I found a house in just outside between Marlow and High Wycombe, and after I joined up, or just before I joined up, we then found a house in Ruislip, and it was from Ruislip that I joined the RAF. And then, after war broke out, except when I was on this trip around the world, as it were, my wife and child moved, I think, 19 times, followed me around to the various places concerned.
Oh, okay. Disruptive. Yes. Did you have any other children?
Yeah, after it was painfully obvious that we were going to win the war, and not before, we decided to have another child. He was born in 44. His last Christopher Rees.
Right,
he went to school. My daughter went to school in Southbourne at a Wentworth College, and my son went first to boarding school and then on to Tunbridge, where he got a scholarship, and then from there he went to St Andrews
University, yes.
Where he got, what was it, a second honours degree?
He's made his career in what?
He eventually made his career in computers.
Yes.
And he went right into computers and became an instructor at IBM. From there he was headhunted by an American company and went for a couple of years to America after he married. And then he came back, started with a firm called Logica, and he's now a partner in the business consultancy side of Touche Ross.
So he's been successful.
He's doing very well.
And
My daughter,
she made a career?
20 years ago, moved to 23 years ago. She was in publishing, and she moved to America. She was headhunted by the big boss of Simon & Schuster, and when he moved to Alfred Knopf, which is the oldest publishing firm in America, he took her with him, and she's now there a senior editor.
Yes.
Is married with a son. My son is married and lives in Northwood and has a daughter of 13, a daughter of 11, a son of 7, a son of 3, and a son of 1.5.
So they're not short of grandchildren. Both your children kept their Jewish identity?
I wouldn't know, but my son is very much so, and is at the present, has been senior, been warden at the New Westminster at the Westminster Synagogue, and is at the present moment chairman of the synagogue.
I don't know where she ended up.
Right. Going back to your synagogue affiliation, you started with the St John's, but did you keep membership of that through
We kept
after the war?
membership of it until we moved to Stanmore in 1947, and then we decided that it was a bit far to go to the synagogue, and we joined Wembley Liberal,
Yes.
and we stayed.
Something in it for 9
We moved.
Right.
So both the children were confirmed at St John's Wood,
Right.
and
While you were the members.
while we were members there, and then we moved to Wembley, where I eventually became vice president with Lady Henricus, two of us together for a long time. So she died.
You
No.
served on the synagogue council then? at
No,
the time?
no, vice presidents don't serve on the
didn't
synagogue
serve
council in Wembley. The only time where they're called, and it did happen quite a bit before we moved, in 1981 to Northwood and Pillar, when the vice presidents and the president were called together by the chairman when we were having a little difficulty with our minister. But that was the only time when the vice presidents were invited to be part of the synagogue council, and I believe that is right. It's an honorary position.
Right. How about, Joe, so you continued after the war in the business, which you've mentioned, but you also took up some political life.
Yes, in 1947, when I came to live in Stanmore, I found we bought a house in a road that was in a terrible condition. So having had quite a bit of experience in the Royal Air Force from the point of view of dealing with buildings and runways and what have you, I went to see the borough engineer and made a fuss about the road, discovered that it had been made worse by the RAF driving, the RAF being the other side of the road, driving down with their heavy lorries and what have you. And I was referred to the North Stanmore Ratepayers Association. So I went to the North Stanmore Ratepayers Association, who said, well, you're just the bloke we're looking for. Here's the file. And this is where we've got to.
Big file, is it? Yes.
The file of dealing with the road. So I started a battle with the Royal Air Force and had joined the Ratepayers Association, first as chairman of their social committee in order to get funds, and then eventually becoming vice chairman, chairman and vice president. I was chairman for quite some time, and when 1954, when Harrow became a borough, or was about to become a borough, I was invited by the Conservative Party, would I like to become a councillor with my experience on the Ratepayers Association, and I acquiesced, and the first job that the new council had to do was to elect 19 aldermen, and therefore there was going to be 19 vacancies. It was agreed with the opposition, which in those days was only the socialists, that in the same proportion as there were numbers on the council, there would be aldermen and there would be replacements in the same amount. So in June 1954, I was elected to the council unopposed. And I stayed
1950, yes, you were on the council.
1954 I went on the council, and I stayed on the council until I became mayor. I was then eventually made an alderman, and in 1970 I became mayor of the borough and was the first Jewish mayor. By that time we had gone from, for the first 7 years I was the only Jew on the council, because they would meet on a Friday. No Jew would attend, and I said, well, I think my civic duty has got to take preference over, and I'm serving the community better that way than not. So in 1970 I became mayor. By that time we had 8 Jews on the council, because I had shamed them into turning over to a Thursday council meeting instead of a Friday one. I can't remember quite what date that was. By that time, of course, my wife had joined me on the council, and she became a member of the council in 1964.
Right.
When Harrow became a London borough of Harrow. Before it was just the borough of Harrow, and then in 1964 became London Borough of Harrow. 1968, when the council found themselves with 62 Conservative and 1 Socialist, 1971, the Conservatives lost the majority, and as I was the end of Alderman went in for 6 years, and I had only got a 3-year term because I took somebody else's place, and therefore I lost the opportunity of continuing as an alderman. So I didn't go back on the council until 1974, when I went back as a councillor. And we stayed until 1986, when we retired from the council. And this year, or no, last year, we became alderman, honorary alderman.
Yeah. Presented with the resolution as honorary alderman.
Honorary alderman by
yes, honorary alderman. So that,
as the 2 of us have done 52 years between us, the council so honoured us.
And how is it perhaps difficult to answer? What do you feel about your many years as a councillor?
Well, both my wife and myself have had a feeling that service to the community is worth doing. She had done quite a lot of social work down the East End of London, as I had. I'd done it since the age of 16. Boys' clubs and what have you until the war, and then after the war the Ratepayer Association is trying to make the position of ratepayers better than it would otherwise be, and then going on the council and fighting for what you consider to be right. And we both went on to serve not only our own area on the council, but the council's representation from London, and from London's representation in national. I finished up in one particular sphere as national chairman for the employers, for the 1.5 million manual workers in the whole of the country, and served on Great London Whitley Council, and at one stage for 3 years I was a co-opted member of the Greater London Council. So I have served on all sorts of bodies, serving the community in one way or another.
Indeed. And I suppose it's perhaps it's a silly question. Did you feel in this you were doing your civic duty as in the way you said your Jewish values, did they come into things very much?
Very much so. I mean, except only to the extent that the totality of representation of the feelings of people within the bounds of the possibility of what one is capable of dealing with. Not that Jews should have any betterment than anybody else, but should have equal opportunity. And to that extent, I was proud of being a Jew and used to represent the point of view of Jews whenever it reared its head. For instance, I eventually got the council to realize that they shouldn't have any meetings on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, or what have you.
And other Jewish councillors on the council, did you feel yourself at all coming together as a Jewish group?
No.
Or not really?
No, I wouldn't have said so.
Wasn't too relevant.
I mean, there wasn't a Jewish caucus by any manner of means. I wouldn't have been party to it. The fact that I was a Jew was exactly the same as being a conservative, a socialist, or what have you. There were Jews on both sides.
Yeah. Yes. Right. As regards being employed, just going back to your business, you employed how many, as you were director of the firm, employing a lot of people? Was there personal relations in dealing with your employees of any interest or account or anything?
Well, I knew the sales staff personally and was part of it. The head office staff, they all knew me and I knew them, and I worked, when I first started in the business in this country, I went into the order room and started writing out orders the same as everybody else. I climbed up through the business, learning as I went. And so to that extent, there were a number of Jewish people in the firm, but we weren't Jewish oriented by any manner of means. But as far as council was concerned, I had the reputation of being extraordinarily friendly with all the employees that I came in contact with. One of the things that I spent the latter half of my time on the council was in personnel, where I became chairman of the personnel committee and then went on to be chairman of the GP committee of the Great London Whitley Council, and then went on the both Nalgo and UP side of negotiations nationally, and was very friendly with a number of people on both sides of the fence, as it were.
Any general reflections on such bargaining or on dealing with such negotiations? Or?
Well, it's as long as you remember that the guy that you're dealing with got a pair of trousers on the same as you have, or a skirt on the same as the ladies have. In other words, I was rather proud of the fact that during the war, in 3 years as CEO of the camp, which I was a commandant of, I had only one corps marshal. Now, there was a rapport between me and everybody as I carried on when I got onto the council. You've got to remember that they are people. You mustn't attack them or you must deal with them as human beings, which is part of, I suppose, my Jewish background.
And you continue, have you retired as from the business?
The family business was sold in 1964, and then I took up a partnership in a planning consultancy firm, became a partner, which was folded up in 1969, 70, something like that.
And since then you've been retired from
Yes,
business,
well,
then?
I've been retired from business, but up to 1986, I spent all my time in local government business.
Yes. Right. How about our congregation? When did you join Northwood and Pinner?
1981. Is that right for you?
Then, and because you were busy still on council business, did you get involved much in doing anything for Northwood and Pinner congregation?
Not really.
At your other interests? And you joined, the reason you joined it obviously was, you had been in, you were living in Stanmore then.
We were living in Stanmore then.
Did you foresee moving in this direction, or just sort of prefer
No,
to where
we got fed up living in a flat. We got fed up
Can you
with
turn
it.
that off?
Well, it's
When I was mayor, I had to have a chaplain, and instead of Albert Friedlander, who was the then minister of Wembley, I chose Sidney Bristow, who lived in Pinner, who we knew fairly well, and so that he could say prayers at council meetings which met on a Thursday, which I knew he would do. Well, when Nan became mayor, she particularly wanted Andrew Goldstein to be her chaplain, and arrangements were made so that we could have, by the then mayor of Hillingdon, that we could have a processional service in Northwood, which is part of Hillingdon.
Yeah, but that connection with Andrew then led you to join Northwood and Pinner
Well,
as
we
your
joined
congregation.
before we had the meeting.
Yeah. Right. So that explains you joined Northwood, and I think we another aspect.
That
Yes.
just before the 1986, when we weren't standing anymore for council, the ward committee threw a surprise party, which was attended by all the ward members, plus the 3 members of Parliament, plus the mayor and a number of councillors and their wives, plus GLC members and their wives, and we were presented with that cloth, and also each of us, I'll go and get it in a minute, a letter from Maggie Thatcher thanking us for our service to the Conservative Party over the years. So that's...
Other than that, has your life allowed you any hobbies?
Well, at the present moment, if my hip was in a better condition, I would be playing bowls.
Yes.
But no particular hobbies.
Not greatly, no.
I'd spent all my hobby time being a councillor.
Yeah.
I used to play golf many years ago.
Right. And so that
And
really...
the only other thing that I can say is that after 25 years of service on the council, I was presented with an illuminated address somewhat similar to that one that you've seen, which is hanging outside. During the year, during my wife's mayoralty, we were both invited and became freemen of the City of London.
So something you remember as a
Oh yes.
considerable honour.
Beautiful ceremony and very nice. Just other things which I represented the Council of London. I was a member of the Thames Water Authority for 8 years, and eventually became Vice Chairman of their General Purpose Committee. And in that capacity visited Norway and Belgium and France. So that was quite an experience.
Were you involved in planning the barrier, or was that all?
No, the barrier until 1986 was entirely a matter for the Greater London Council.
Yes.
No.
You've been a member of Ajax.
I've been a member of Ajax.
Active in the meetings.
When I became mayor, I joined the London Mayors Association and climbed up through the various places until at the present moment I am president of the London Mayors Association. And as such, on Sunday we'll be attending the annual ceremony where we have all the London mayors in their beautiful red robes, what have you, and their mace bearers, and a beautiful ceremony which takes place beginning of September every year.
Westminster Abbey, that was
At Westminster Abbey.
Really? Thank you, Frank. Now, we enjoyed hearing that. Let's turn to you, Nan, and can you tell me where and when you were born?
I was born in Charing Cross, 26 Charing Cross Road, on the 17th of September 1912.
And the names of your parents?
My father was Daniel Hyams, Hyams. My mother was Elka Alice. And the maiden name was Alvarez. Alvarez, Alvarez.
Right. And
On both sides, they're Spanish.
so what sort of period did they come to this
It
country?
came during the Spanish Inquisition. There were 4 families. The first 4 families, my sister, who is a younger sister, who is a journalist, has done a tremendous amount of research. And Beavis Marks have the papers, the records going back. And the first 4 families that came were allowed into Britain. One of those was Alvarez, and that's where my family was.
Very nice. Yes.
Well, I'm not absolutely certain of the date, and I think it was Cromwell's time,
Right.
on the 6th,
That-
yes.
That's all in the records and the history of the
Yes,
Spanish
yes.
and Portuguese synagogue.
Yes.
So when did your parents? When did your parents marry?
They married, well, I don't know what, 1910.
And what was your father's business?
He was, the family for generations were in Covent Garden. That's why we lived in central London.
In wholesale fruit and vegetable.
And his great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather, was the first man to import oranges into England in bulk. I mean, yes, we know Nellie Gwynn had oranges, but that was from the orangeries.
See. Right. Did you have brothers and sisters? Did you have?
Yeah, one brother, older than myself, 18 months older, and a sister 10 years younger.
And what was your family were members, and obviously, of the Spanish and Portuguese
Well,
synagogue?
they were never, yes, they were members of the Spanish and Portuguese, and then I think it was that I joined the alumni, and through me they went to, when I was only about 14 at the time, and we went to the Liberal, and we belonged to St John's Wood.
Your Your parents as well changed.
At that time we'd moved and we were living in Maida Vale.
So your original religious upbringing was Orthodox then?
Not very good.
Did you not go to religion school?
No, never.
And your family didn't observe? Did your family observe?
The high
much at
holy
home?
days, but we didn't have a kosher house.
Didn't even have got to say Seder presumably.
We had, yes, high holy days. We kept those, and we go to synagogue. Yes, actually, I used to go to synagogue when I joined the LGAS much more when I was young.
Did they keep Shabbat in the home?
Not terribly.
Yeah, so
Of course, remember in those days, to a very large extent,
My
one
father had to
worked
work
on a
a
Saturday.
My father had to work on a Saturday.
even though he was in charge, he was the director of the business, but
Well, yes, I mean, yes, but he had to work on a Saturday. Very hard work, you know,
So
3 o'clock in the morning.
So, and what would you like otherwise to say about your parents, their character?
Well, I can talk lots about them, you know, about our history, but because I know quite a lot about it. You know.
Individually, as individuals?
I'm not
anything
talking about
that
my parents, I'm talking about my forebears.
Yes. Do you remember your grandparents? Do you remember them personally?
My maternal, both my maternal and paternal grandmother, but both the grandfathers were dead. My paternal grandfather died at 34. He was a bit, you know, but he left 8 children. No comment. But I remember my mother's father, but he also died young. So it was the 2 grandmothers I remember, both big families, 8 and 9.
They
did
were.
have big families.
They.
And my great aunt, my mother's youngest sister, was headmistress of the Jewish Kids. They were all, my mother's sisters and my mother were teachers. They were all teachers.
She didn't
She
continue
taught.
teaching after she was married? Or?
No, she never really liked it, and she was very happy to give it up.
So your family history, right, is well documented. Your child, where did you go to school?
Well, for a while I went to a nice tale about that. You said about anti-Semitism, and I must say that on the whole I haven't struck. But I did go, when I first went to school, my mother wanted me to go to St Martin's High School, which was in Leicester Square, right on top of it. It moved many, many years ago. And I couldn't get in right away, there was not a vacancy. So I went to the small local authority house, which was Middlesex, the London County Council in those days, which took place in the crypt of St Martin's in the Field. And my mother told me I was a Jewish child and I wasn't to take new Testament. And I can always remember this most vividly, sitting, reading a book. They gave me a book to read during, I suppose I was about 5 at the time, and I suppose it was a picture book to look at. And they must have been having New Testaments in the crucifixion. And one small boy, and I can see him in my mind's eye now, and he looked at me and he said, "You spat at Christ. No, you crucified Christ." And I said, "No, I didn't. I never knew him." I didn't know who Christ was.
So that was your first school, but you didn't meet much. You didn't.
I didn't meet much. No, when I went to St Martin, then the next term I thought I had a term there. Went to St Martin's in the Field, and you know, I can always remember when they had prayers. There were RCs and something and ODs to fall out, and I hated being an OD. I didn't even know what OD meant, other than nomination.
Right.
And then after that, St Martin's moved. They they went over to South London, and I went up to Putney High School. And the rest of I used to travel up to Putney High School.
So again, were you conscious of being with other Jews in school, or not many?
Not many when I went to Putney High. Quite a few at St Martin's, yes.
So you didn't have much Jewish background until what?
Until I really went to the LJS.
How did you hear? Do you know how you heard about that?
I can't remember. I was about 14. I can't remember. Somebody must have said, "Come along to the alumni."
Is that?
We used to say, "Come to play and stay to play."
Was when did the Alumni Society meet? What time of the day or week was that? Those days?
Oh, all times. They met a lot. We had all sorts of things, you know, dramatic society. I was interested in that when I went on the stage. Actually, I trained.
So what, after your after school you went
After school, I went to the Royal Academy. Not the RADA, but the Guild Award of Dramatic.
So, and what did you do after that? How old were you when you left the academy?
Oh. I don't know. I had quite a bit of. I went to the Embassy Theatre at Swiss Cottage, and I went to town. I understudied and was at the Comedy Theatre. Did quite a bit, and I did repertory up in Moscow.
So you were a professional actress for?
Yes. For 3 years. Then my mother was ill, and I went back home to really look after her. And then I've been getting engaged and breaking it off over a period of time. And then eventually I got married.
As we've heard in 1937.
Forest episode.
Oh yes, I did all sorts. My family all said to me, "Nan tried everything." I had a florist shop. Well, I was a trained florist, but I had a florist shop. My aunt died and left me some money. I put it in that was in St John's Wood too.
Did you play? Which of these careers didn't you enjoy them all? Did you?
I enjoyed them all. Whatever I did. The only thing I never did was undertaking. So my family said. Yes, I enjoyed I had a wonderful young life. Wonderful. You know, it was in between wars, 30s. We enjoyed it. We had great time.
Did you play much of a part in the LJS?
I played quite a big part. I became secretary of the alumni. I was very involved in all sorts of things. When I was there, then I became a member of the Women's Society. We used to do all the catering. I was very, very fond of Mrs. Mattock, we were great friends. And, I did an awful lot with many of them, all the elders. Now the elders, many of them have gone in the old days with my girlhood friends.
Your mother was ill. When in fact did she die?
She didn't die. She had a heart condition for many years. She died in 1944. Right? No, that was your mother died in 1944.
Died in 1944.
Yes, just before Christmas. Mother died after the war. Christopher was about, I don't remember dates. Wait a minute, I can tell you, Christopher was at school, he was about 8. So, yes, do a bit of a
At an age, at some advanced age,
she was only 72.
72. And your father, did he?
Father lived another 4 years.
56. So did your mother's illness in fact then affect, it affected your life only temporarily?
Temporarily, I went home really not to look after her, but to do a bit of housekeeping. I knew she worried about me. I was around.
Or did your mother need a nurse in for a while or something?
No, she didn't have a nurse. We had a very devoted, my old nanny was a very devoted housekeeper. She only died of 18 months ago at the age of 9. And, between us we...
Right. And you continued living at home until you were married, And where was the family home then?
Well, I'm married from Golders Green. We were living in a house in Golders Green.
Oh, you said originally you were Charing Cross Road.
I was born in Charing Cross Road, and then we moved to Vale Court.
Whereabouts is that?
That's corner of Abbey Hall Road, isn't it?
Oh, St John's
Hall
Wood.
Road,
Yes.
St John's Wood, yes.
Yes.
Maid of Vale and Hall Road or something.
Yes.
Yeah. And then we moved to Golders. No, we moved to. Oh, I forgot the Gordon Avenue. No, I'm wrong.
Gordon.
I was born in Charing Cross Road, and we moved to Gordon Mansions, which is
Just off Tottenham Court Road.
yes, just off Gordon Square. We lived there 10 years, and then we moved to Vale Court.
Right.
Vale Court, you moved to Golders Green.
Yeah, and that's where we were married from.
You were married from Golders
Right.
Green.
Yes.
Right. And your establishment was not. Did you had one or two? You had to live in housekeeping or? No?
Where? At home?
Well, generally, yes.
No, we had, as I say, my old nanny. No. Our establishment wasn't like theirs.
But your
Nothing like.
your family business was quite
Yes,
quite
yes.
quite.
My father was a lovely man, but a terrible gambler. He gambled. He made and gambled away 4 for. We had our ups and downs.
Well, so you were married, as we heard, and you settled down.
Can I just say that my mother and father were the most wonderful mother and father.
And, even though
We married, yes, in 1937. You heard that.
and then you had one, and then the war affected you considerably. As you moved to, you had to move around the country. That was disruptive.
Yes. First, as Frank said, we had that cottage, and then I stayed put there, and then he went into the RAF, and he was in England for quite a while, and I decided to follow him round as much as I could, as long as I could, until he went to Bournemouth. And then I had a house in Halliwell Road, Northwood, a furnished house in Halliwell Road, Northwood, until he came back, and then he got his own, he became CEO of his own, of the station in Forward, and I went down there, and then had my son born down there.
Whereabouts was that called?
Great Horwood, it's in Bucks, it's nearest
Just outside Winslow.
Winslow.
Right.
Not far from Buckinghamshire.
And I suppose that disrupted your Jewish life, I suppose.
Didn't have much Jewish life there at all, no,
No.
not during the war. We used to see, we saw Leslie Egger a couple of times, you saw him, he came
Yes,
to you.
he came.
Yeah.
I created a chapel on the unit, and Leslie Edgar came down on
Yeah.
a couple of occasions
Yes,
to
you
see
forgot
the
to
Jewish
mention that.
as a Jewish chaplain.
Right. So after the war, things got back a little more to normal.
Yes, after the war Frank was demobilised, and through a friend, my family was living in my mother and father were living in Kensington then, and we got a flat in Earl's Court Road through a very great friend of mine. It was very difficult. Children hated it. They'd never lived in a town. I had a wonderful old nanny for them. And she hated it. She threatened to leave. She didn't like living in town. Even the dog hated it. So we said, we move out. We went to Stanmore. That was in 1947. We went to Stanmore. And we lived there for 39 years.
Right. And you were first occupied in bringing up the children.
Bringing up the children, right. Well, I had this wonderful nanny.
With you.
And they both went to boarding school.
Yes.
So,
Found time on your hands?
yes, and some, but, never found time on that. I always could find something to do. I had a small dressmaking business for a little while. Always did something. And then, actually, it was Theo Constantine, Lord Constantine now, who was my neighbour, next door neighbour, almost next door on the other side of the road. And it was through him that I became very involved in, I was chairman of Harrow East Conservative Association. But I mean, that was a long, it took quite a while, and I became very involved in that. I was always involved in the political side, much more than Frank was. And he went on the council, of course, a long time before I did.
So was it a natural step to follow him and to become a councillor?
It wasn't really. I was more than surprised. But it was when, in 1964, each ward was enlarged. You see, the what's the name commission, enlarged the amount of councillors. The boundary commission enlarged we went from 3 to 5 councillors, and they were looking for 2 more councillors, and the ward asked me would I would secretary of the ward, all sorts of things I'd done, I was very involved. And then of course I went on the council. I was also very interested in the social services side, and when I went on the social services committee. And I had 3 years as chairman of social services, Harrow, and then I also represented Harrow on the London Boroughs Association, where I became chairman of the London Boroughs Social Services, and I was chairman there for 8 years, until I came off council.
So.
Oh yes, I'm responsible for the bus passes. The old people. I did a tremendous amount of work with Linda Chalker then, who was the then minister. What I haven't said that I joined the WRVS in 1943 I became a member then, and when I first came to Harrow, I first came to live in Stanmore, I'd had a period because I couldn't do much because of moving around, and I had young children. And then I joined up, sort of made my connections again with WRVS, and I ran the Mills on Wheels here in Harrow until the council took them over. That was before I went on the council.
And any other general reflections on being a councillor, and again, whether anything particularly from a Jewish point of view? Or
No, I was so involved with social services, did such a lot of that sort of work. I was also chairman of the Children's Regional Planning for 8 years, which deals with all the children in trouble in the Greater London area, which was quite a job. I was up to town 2 or 3 times a week. I went all over the country on that. I had a lot to do with the DHSS.
Did during this period as a councillor, you presumably didn't have much time for involvement in synagogue, whether LJS or Stanmore?
Well, by the time I became a councillor, we no longer went up to LJS. And as I told you, he went and I didn't know.
So you weren't involved. No.
Get more involved now if I get older.
And when we've heard you joined eventually Northwood and Pinner, have you again become particularly involved at all?
Well, I am an original member of the thing I suppose I've got most involved with. The luncheon club, we have that luncheon club, Tuesday luncheon club, and I've been involved with getting speakers and been involved in the organisation of that. I enjoyed that very much. I would like to do more, but because of him not being well, we had all sorts of plans once we retired of doing so much, but because of his not being well, I'm not as fit as I can be. A woggy heart, so I had to take it a bit easy. I'd like to do more, actually.
Right. What do you have other hobbies or interests you haven't mentioned?
Well, I'm very keen on gardening. You can't see my garden, but I'm getting also too old. No, I can't do the heavy work on that anymore.
Your children, Frank has mentioned. Is there anything else? So you're Because you keep in touch with them and your grandchildren?
Oh yes, I'm. Well, when I came, I've always been involved in National Council of Women. I was a founder chairman of Stanmore 23 years ago, Stanmore branch, and I'm now the regional chairman. I sort of
What's West Area?
yes, of the Home Counties North area, which stretches from Wembley, Harrow, Pinner, northward, Stanmore, out to Aylesbury, and all the places, Berkhamsted, all the places in between. We have 13 branches. If you watch the television on the 26th, you'll see we're doing a thing on that on the 28th.
On the National Council?
Yes, there's a new programme, a morning programme.
So you find that, you found that
Yes,
also
I find that,
interesting?
yes, very interesting. We go
What sort of issues have you?
every issue under the sun. Of course, we've achieved almost all our big issues. You know, we started off 90 years ago because of the vote for women. So we've achieved a tremendous amount, but there's still quite a lot to achieve. And we're in communication with the various ministries, as every type of special committee deals with social welfare, health welfare, magistrates, mass media, education, housing. I'm terribly proud of it.
Of the Alvarez, yes.
People say to me, or people have said to me, "Oh, you're Jewish. I thought you were English." And I say, "Can you trace your family back? I reckon I am English. Can you trace your family back?" And usually they can't.
Back to the Cromwell's time, yes. So you know about that, and yes. Anything else you'd like to know?
Yeah. I could tell you about my uncle that was hanged at Tyburn for highway robbery. I mean this. Do you want to hear about that?
It's not Jewish.
Your uncle?
It's not Jew. Well, I do it. Great uncle.
Yeah.
The last man to be hanged at Tyburn. You know where Tyburn is. Yeah. The last man to be hanged at Tyburn for highway robbery. And a few years afterwards, and he was hanged for highway robbery because he was circumstantial evidence found with a silk handkerchief on him that had been Lord somebody or other had been robbed on the King's Highway. And he was hanged on circumstantial evidence, the silk handkerchief, with the silk tie. And some years after, the family were notified that the man that had really done it and confessed, he was anyhow in prison. This is quite true. And he was in prison, and he was going for the chop anyhow. So he thought he confessed. And the family were allowed to take the body out and bury it in consecrated ground. And he was buried in the cemetery that was very badly bombed during the war in Whitechapel. It was the oldest Jewish cemetery in the London area. And actually, when I was quite young, 14 or 15, Mother, I'd always heard this story. My grandmother always said, you know, that what comes of keeping bad company, because he evidently did keep bad company, let's face it. There was no Meghan Martin. The family names were anglicised, sadly. Nunez Martinez was anglicised to Martin. Toledano was anglicised to Daniels, but Alvarez always remained Alvarez. But these were my family names. And we did go down to that cemetery. It was in a pretty bad state, but we found the grave. But since then, it was very badly bombed.
That's a nice anecdote.
Nice
Does the Alvarez name continue in as a male line?
Oh yes. Not, there's only two of them.
Was it Eddie?
Eddie and his brother.
So as a historic name, it does continue.
Yeah. But I mean, there are other, but it's all that, you know, we're a big family. It's all been from the original.
Right. Well, you do both agree that copyright in this tape is the property of the Northwood and Pinner Oral History Project, and there's nothing in what you've said on the tape that you would want to keep confidential. Is it? No? Right. Thanks. Photographs taken were Frank and Nan in their respective mayoral, both in their robes as mayor, and some hand paintings, are they?
Yes.
Paintings on ivory of your of
Frank's grandfather and grandmother.
Right. And they
on his mother's side.
Right, and dated 1907 on the back of the pictures.